and welcome to another edition of the NOLA Rundown. I'm Will Osgood, and I'm going to be by myself again for this episode. And of course, we're talking about the No-Call NFC Championship Game. This is kind of the review of that, and I'm sure just by my voice you know how I feel and how I know how every Saints fan probably still feels, even on Thursday, January 24th. I'm having a hard time getting over Sunday's game, although admittedly I'm better today than I've been. I'll talk a little bit about that. I think there's probably like 100 different angles that we can look at this, and can't get to all of them, especially in a short amount of time, but can look at several of them, and that's the goal in the next few minutes, just to look at some of the different angles and kind of put them all together and come up with kind of a comprehensive, at this point, look at Sunday and what happened, and I'll get to as well a couple other things, New Orleans or Southeast Louisiana sports related, but obviously the big story is still the no call in the NFC Championship game. So without further ado, I'll just jump into that. I think there's one thing that everyone can agree on, I would hope, and that's that the Rams were worthy winners, just as the Saints would have been had, we gotten the most obvious call in the history of sports, or as Skip Bayless called it, the worst no call in the history of sports, and on Monday. And if Skip Bayless is saying that, it must be bad. If you're actually agreeing with Skip Bayless, it must be pretty darn obvious. So that in and of itself, I think, says something. Maybe not a lot, but it says something. You could say that in a sense, neither team deserved to lose. The game went to overtime, and that's just as we saw in the AFC Championship game. It's really hard to think that either team deserves to lose when a game goes to overtime. You could also flip that around, and say that in a sense, neither team really deserved to win. Both teams had some really rough stretches of football. Obviously the first quarter for the Rams, and for the Saints, a lot of the second and third quarter, I would say, were rough. Listening to Mike Lombardi on the GM Street podcast that he does for The Ringer, talking about the middle 8 minutes of the game, the last 4 of the second quarter and the first 4 of the third quarter. Of course, the Saints did well in the first 4 minutes of the third quarter, but it was pretty much after that when they kind of let things go. But neither team played excellent. I think that can be agreed upon. The Saints never really got the offense going the way we expected. Of course, being held to field goals on the first 2 red zone possessions. One of those off a Dan Arnold drop that it's really getting to a point where it's kind of like we need a legitimate tight end again. We need another Jimmy Graham. Clearly that's not Josh Hill, although his loss actually came back to haunt the Saints a little bit when he went out getting hurt, of course, with Benjamin Watson not playing. But Dan Arnold's not it. Josh Hill's not it. There's got to be somebody else. But we'll get to that, not even today, but in another couple weeks probably. And I'm sure myself and most of the guys on the crew will agree that tight end's probably a major spot. But not really the point for now. But yeah, the Saints never really got the offense going. Michael Thomas, 4 catches, 36 yards. Not great. Yeah. The Rams, though, at the same time, they couldn't get their running game going. Todd Gurley, as was talked about throughout the game and after, was basically a non-factor. C.J. Anderson, even though he got the bulk of the carries and the snaps, really wasn't much of a factor either. And that was, and what makes that so disheartening, at least from my perspective, is that that was the number one key. And I figured if the Saints could slow down the Rams running game the way they did, that we would have not only won, but I would have thought we would have blown them out. And I still hold to the fact that I really think we should have blown them out. It was set up for that, but again, the offense just couldn't get going. And part of that was due to key number 2, which was slowing down or preventing Ndamukong Suh and especially Aaron Donald from being big factors. But they were big factors, especially at certain points of the game. They made enough plays along the defensive line, both in the run game and the pass game, to kind of keep the Rams in it. And I would say that was really what they did. They kept the Rams in it when the Saints could have blown things open. Those two guys really kept the Rams in the game. And so that was a bit disheartening from a Saints perspective, because again, and yeah, we'll talk more about, I'm going to continue to hammer on the no call, and that's coming in just a second. But I would agree with people who say the Saints shouldn't have even been in that position, or you can make the case they should have kept playing, or could have won after that no call. I kind of disagree with that part, but anyway, yeah. Of course, the big story of Sunday, the one I will never forget, no Saints fan will ever forget, I don't think, is the no call on the obvious pass interference. And the fact that Sean Payton got confirmation from the head of the NFL officiating, Al Riverone, immediately after the game, that it was not only pass interference, but also helmet to helmet. And you may have seen a tweet or whatever, some social media post from Adam Schefter saying there were 4 different possible calls on that play, all of which would have gone against the Rams. So anything they could have and should have called would have, if not at least given the Saints another play, because I don't think they were all automatic first downs. I think the other 2 that Schefter mentioned, I can't remember what they were at this point. But they may not have been automatic first downs, but they would have at least given another play. But the 2 obvious ones, the ones that Peyton talked about, the pass interference and the helmet to helmet, obviously either of those would have been automatic first downs. And even though the Rams still had 1 timeout, the Saints still, by my math, and I did this last night, and I think I've done it more than once. By my math, I believe they could have killed the clock all the way down and kicked the field goal, the 20-ish yard, whatever, game-winning field goal by Will Lutz, as regulation would have expired. I believe I'm correct in saying that. It's a little hard to know for sure, but you assume the next play gets them down to about 140. Rams call a timeout, 2nd and goal, do it again, another kneel down, that gets you down to about a minute, and then from there you can, on 3rd down, you can kneel down once again, and maybe the math, yeah, maybe there would be a little bit of time left, but either way, you would have felt a lot better about a 3-point lead with 20 or fewer seconds than a minute 45 or whatever it was, and so yeah, I think it's still fair to say that it basically was game over. It would have won the game. And so yeah. I think we can say it this outright. If the officials make the obvious call, which there's 2 officials watching the play, looking at it with a perfect view, the Saints win. And like I said, some have have pointed out that, the Saints still had a chance to stop the Rams. They still had a chance to win in overtime, which we could talk about more too, and the possible pass interference that led to the interception in overtime. And I haven't gone back and watched that play yet, or at least the cut up of it, or the coach's film, but it does seem like yeah, that probably was pass interference as well. And so not obviously not as blatant, not as cut and dry as the first play. But yeah, it was probably pass interference as well, which only makes this even worse. And then you have, Rams offensive lineman Andrew Whitworth on Tuesday, or maybe it was yesterday, told Rich Eisen of NFL Network that the no call is just an excuse. And I understand if you're the Rams, it's easy to say that. To some extent I get it. But I would hope if the script had been flipped and the Saints had won the way the Rams won, that we would be more gracious about that call and just be honest and just admit, yeah, we, which I guess to some extent, Nicole Roby Coleman has been now, after seeing the video of the play, right after the game. He immediately admitted that it was an obvious pass interference. And even, and I would say stupidly, tried to explain why it was a good play. It wasn't. Had he been called for the pass interference, as he ought to have, he would have secured the Saints' victory, as I already talked about. Whereas, allowing Tommy Lee Lewis to catch the ball and score would have actually given the Rams more time to potentially tie the game. Now, yes, it would have been a 7-point deficit as opposed to 3. But the time difference would have, and the way that the Rams offense had been moving through the air, especially in the last, to some extent from the fake punt conversion, to the end of the game, the Rams passing game was moving pretty well. And so from a Rams perspective, allowing him to catch that ball and score probably would have been the smarter play than taking the pass interference, which is what he did, and it didn't get called. Be that as it may, you can, and I think rightly, question Sean Payton and the Saints offense for throwing the ball on first down after the 2-minute warning. And again, I haven't gone back and watched it really at all yet. So I can't even say for myself, but I don't know that I'm 1,000% sure that Thomas didn't catch that ball. And because it was under 2 minutes, that would have had to be a booth review. So that's another interesting thing at play that I'll look into in the next few days, probably, or by next week. And I hope to have a friend, James McGovern, come on, and he and I have already discussed this through a messenger chat or whatever. But I'd love to have him on the air, and we can talk about this more. Some of the strategic elements, especially of that last situation, but really the entire game. And we'll do that when this is a little less raw for Saints fans. But I think the most important thing, again, and keep hammering on it because it deserves to be hammered on, it really does, is that one play on the 3rd and 10 at the 13-yard line, when Tommy Lee Lewis gets helmet-to-helmeted, pass interfered with by Nicole Roby Coleman. It's indisputably a penalty. And even if you're not going to call pass interference, certainly helmet-to-helmet. And again, either would have been an automatic first down and more or less